between Republican or Democrats when we examine the policies, methodologies, and the material results of their platforms. Yet, the preacher, the city councilman, and the nonprofit keeps telling us it's all about compromise. We should just trust that a Democrat in office is going to be enough. So, when election time comes around and the Democratic Party is shoveling money into the preacher, the councilman, and the nonprofit's pockets to get us to the ballot box, remember that compromise on the backs of our communities should never be a goddamn option in the first place. We live in a society, and we can live in a society. Yes. And the working class has the leadership capacity to create such a place that our work can benefit us all. Instead of relying on a fake two-party system that consistently misrepresents or actively goes against the needs of the working people, we, the workers, need to be our own representatives. So here at the Workers Group, we are for participating in bourgeois elections. But we know that an electoral system run by two parties who are the lapdogs of the capitalist class can never move the working class forward. This necessitates that we, the working class, have a party that centers on our interests, a party that prioritizes workers engaging in the political process as leaders, not as those to be led. We must create a workers' party that fights for our interests, be that economically, environmentally, and socially. While under capitalism, there can be no true democracy. We must now lay the foundation of a movement that will dismantle the capitalist hold on private property, smash the state, and liberate ourselves from wage slavery. A workers' movement whose tasks include the creation of a workers' state. Only through taking this first step by creating a workers' party can the potential of humanity be fully recognized.
Y'all give it up for Nettie one more time. And look, you know, I know she was coming with a lot of hard-hitting facts, and there's a lot to digest all at once, but we're recording it. We're going to put it up on YouTube. You can check it out. Just type in New Orleans Workers Group under YouTube, all right? As well as all our previous other forums that we have up there as well. So now we got Nettie hit us with them hard-hitting facts and all that info, and you know what I'm saying, presenting it with the passion and love that she got for the working class people. And we're going to go ahead and bring that on over to our girl Meg, aka Megs. You know, she be holding it down for the Hospitality Workers Alliance. You know, somebody that's consistently organizing hospitality workers. You know, industry that makes over $8 billion annually in this city, but you know, the actual workers not benefiting from that. So, you know, she here to drop some hard-hitting science as to, you know what I'm saying, what it is we could do to organize and get ourselves right and get ourselves in a position of power. So give it up for my girl Megs again.
Hey y'all, thanks for being here tonight. Forgive me if anything overlaps over my comrades' talk. We tend to be one band, one sound in the workers group. So what are the conditions of working class people in Louisiana, and have our material work and living conditions seen any real improvement under one administration to the next? We know the state of Louisiana and the working class people in it is very poor. We understand that it's been a consistent reality despite all of the profits being extracted from the state. We know that we're living in a state with the second highest poverty rate in the country. We know that 1 out of 4 children live in poverty. We know that we have the highest percentage of workers earning at or below the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. with 200,000 workers receiving $27.25 an hour and 700,000 workers receiving less than $12 an hour, which we know is still well below a living wage. We know that 67% of us receiving the minimum wage are women. We know that 42% are white, meaning that the other 58% making the minimum wage are Black, Indigenous, and Latinx workers, despite white people totaling at 62% of the population. We know that we're losing over a football field worth of wetlands every hour, that we have the highest incarceration rate in the world, some of the most regressive anti-abortion laws in the country, and we know that Louisiana has become a hub for 8 refugee detention centers under the supervision of John Bel Edwards. Which brings me to the governor's election. Was John Bel Edwards getting re-elected governor a defeat of white supremacy?
No.
I think most of us know the answer is no at this point. We know he's less reactionary than Risponi, that's clear. But together, Democrats and Republicans support the continuation of exploitation of the working class. They are together in maintaining capitalist white supremacist rule. They all brag about how great Louisiana is for business. Oh, how great the economy is. And why is Louisiana's economy so great for business? The Louisiana Economic Development Agency, also known as LED, a government-run agency, whose head secretary was appointed by John Bel Edwards himself, actively advertises Louisiana as being ranked the lowest cost U.S. state for business. In their advertising, they talk about how great the right-to-work laws are, how low labor costs are, and how Louisiana's low taxes and tax exemptions make for a great environment for business. Should we trust these same people who are dedicated to keeping Louisiana business-friendly to raise the minimum wage? I think not. The same way that we cannot trust the Democratic Party to stop Trump, we can see clearly how city, state, and federal government use the same tactics to make the people believe that they are fighting for us. Why didn't they rush to impeach Trump over children in cages, spreading race hatred and white supremacist ideology, or being a rapist? It seems none of these were enough for impeachment to the Democratic Party. What was worthy of impeachment then? Not wanting to sell arms to the Ukraine, a fascist government installed by the Obama-Biden administration, inquiring about the role of the U.S. in the Ukraine. This is what's impeachment worthy. Not wanting to sell arms to a government that arms and works directly with white supremacist militias. Militias that then are turning around and training white supremacist militias here in the United States. The Democratic Party is not fighting white supremacy. They are actively funding and arming it. It is clear that we cannot rely on the Democratic Party to fight white supremacy, fascism, or capitalist exploitation. Understanding the interest both the Democratic and Republican Party represent is the key to moving beyond them into building true representation for the working class.
Yes.
I experienced this situation firsthand organizing with the New Orleans Hospitality Workers Alliance. For several years before it hit the mainstream New Orleans media, the Alliance was storming meetings like the Tourism and Marketing Corporation and Convention Center board meetings. Unelected boards made up of business owners and public officials. We were sounding the alarm about the $180 million in stolen tourism revenue that workers generated. We were demanding that they return all of the $180,000 in stolen revenue and use it to serve the workers that generated that revenue for things like healthcare, childcare, decent public transportation, maternity leave, etc. Things that we as working class people in New Orleans desperately need. After storming the first board meeting, several city officials, Kristen Palmer, Jason Williams, and Jay Banks, held a press conference announcing a new day for hospitality workers in New Orleans. All of these public officials sat on the very board that was robbing the people. During the press conference, these officials made no promises of tangible action they would be taking, such as returning the money they helped to steal, or creating a health fund for hospitality workers. The Hospitality Workers Alliance even met with these public officials. All three were presented the Workweek Ordinance, a basic scheduling ordinance for workers that includes 2 weeks scheduling advance, 12 paid sick days, and the right for workers to take off for doctor's appointments and parent-teacher conferences without retaliation, which is currently a huge problem in this city, as well as demanding an immediate return of all the stolen taxes. All three took one look at the most basic of scheduling laws and sick leave for workers and pushed it away, refusing to endorse it. This just a few days after announcing a new day for hospitality workers in New Orleans. I'd say it's not a new day at all. It's actually business as usual. Now the mayor is fighting for her fair share out of it, not a return of all the stolen taxes. No, she just wants some of the stolen taxes for infrastructure. And we have to ask the question, infrastructure for who? Is it for New Orleans residents? Or is it to help her and her real estate developer friends beautify the city for their gentrification projects? The same mayor who ran on a campaign of clean and safe environments for New Orleanians still hasn't fully funded a just relocation for the residents of Gordon Plaza, who were sold homes by the city built on a toxic waste dump. Despite being endorsed by every progressive nonprofit under the sun, Mayor Cantrell invested an additional $2 million in cops, jails, and reactive measures, keeping in mind that we already invest over 60% of our budget in cops, jails, and reactive measures. Just, how could somebody do that, right? There are police that have gotten a raise under Mayor Cantrell. Our question is, when are the 100,000 plus hospitality workers in New Orleans going to get a raise? Or sick leave? Or reliable public transportation? When are the residents of Gordon Plaza going to get a fully funded relocation? When these are not the actions of someone who represents working class New Orleanians, these are the actions of someone who represents real estate developers, cops, and tourism capitalists. So we know that politicians in New Orleans aren't going to save us. We know that us workers aren't getting our fair share, that it's clearly not a new day for hospitality workers or any other working class people in New Orleans, that it's business as usual. One thing we in the Hospitality Workers Alliance know is that we cannot wait for politicians or bosses to give us our rights. That we as workers need to get organized and to man them. That an organized workforce is how workers win. That if tomorrow 3,000 hospitality workers walked off their job and marched to City Hall demanding 12 paid sick days a year, that we would get it. And we are dedicated to doing the work to make that happen. We are working towards that day. And the day that hospitality workers in New Orleans march together, one band, one sound, to demand our long overdue rights. This is the work that we must be engaged in. We know that it's a long-term struggle, but it's one that we must take on. The same logic can be applied to statewide struggles. We know that we cannot wait for a person like John Bell Edwards, or any other politician for that matter, to raise the minimum wage. He's been a politician in Louisiana since 2011. Has the minimum wage been raised? No. Because these people are in the pockets of our bosses. They aren't willing to put up any kind of a real fight that could bring the people into a struggle to make this possible. When a politician says that they're fighting for us, that they're fighting for anything, what they really mean is that they have done the bare minimum to make it look like they're fighting for something. They successfully co-opt the language of social movements, built with the labor of working people, water it down, and actively lead the people to believe that it is them, the politicians, that will win these things, that they are our saviors, and all we have to do is sit back and wait. That voting is the extent of our political power as workers, and when the people do win said concessions, our so-called representatives step in quite quickly to claim the win as their own, rewriting history so that it seems it wasn't the people who fought and won these demands, but the benevolent rulers who graciously handed us our rights. For us to believe this is in their benefit, not ours. An example of the watering down of history is the New Deal of the 1930s, which created a multitude of agencies that we know and reforms like Social Security, the recognition of workers' rights to join a union, the introduction of a federal minimum wage, etc. The New Deal didn't become a reality because Franklin Roosevelt made it one. It was the demands of millions of unemployed workers and masses of striking workers that forced the pressure from below. Roosevelt responded to the pressure of a rising class struggle, not his own moral conscience.
Yes.
He was trying to save capitalism from its own manufactured crisis. In his own words, do you want me to wait until the workers march to the White House with machine guns? There are countless historical examples of this. So what does this tell us? That the independent movement of the workers is the real driving force of change throughout history, not capitalist politicians, and that if we want the minimum wage to be raised in Louisiana, that we have to go out and organize workers to demand it. We gotta find a way to bring the working class people into a struggle, and we should look to the people of the world for examples. We can look to Puerto Rico, Haiti, Chile, Colombia, South Africa, where they are taken to the streets en masse. In Puerto Rico, the people have successfully forced the governor to resign and are building people's assemblies. In Venezuela, they have built working class councils that include indigenous and Afro-Venezuelan people in comparison to the mostly white, land-owning capitalist in the old Congress. Or in South Africa, where this year they formally launched the Socialist Revolutionary Workers' Party, hugely backed by thousands of unionized mine workers. The power of the working people comes with the organization of the working people.
That's right.
We have a lot facing us, and what we need to do as working class people here in Louisiana is we gotta get organized. We gotta get organized quickly. We are divided, and workers, particularly sectors of the white working class, are infected with white supremacy, homophobia, and sexism. We can overcome these things, but voting Democrat once a year isn't going to combat white supremacist ideology, especially while both Republicans and Democrats are scapegoating sectors of the working class, with John Bell Edwards accusing Risponi of hiring foreign workers, and Risponi vowing to crack down on anti-ICE protesters. Both have scapegoated and placed blame on migrant workers, and have actively spread this to the entire working class. This ideology is dangerous, and it must be combated. Myself and other comrades in the workers group, who are white workers from the South, have been meeting to discuss how can we go about reaching out to the white workers, especially in rural areas, to try and organize them around working class interests while combating harmful ideology rooted in white supremacy. We know that we have to start by going to the workers, because if we don't go out to the white working class, the Klan will. We cannot continue to put all of our energy and hope into campaigning for the Democratic Party. We have to put our energy into organizing the workers, pulling them away from the scapegoating being used on both sides, and into class struggles capable of identifying the real enemies, the capitalist ruling class. The goal of the capitalist establishment is to keep the working class divided and fighting each other. We must combat white supremacist ideology throughout any struggle the working class we're engaged in. We need to be building solidarity between Black, white, indigenous, LGBTQ, and refugee workers. We need to show the white working class that we have more in common with our Black and migrant co-workers than we have with the ultra-rich politicians and bosses. If this means organizing workers across Louisiana around a struggle for a minimum wage increase, which studies show 76% of the population in Louisiana support, organizing workers in New Orleans around a fight for paid sick days, or organizing the people around an independent candidate dedicated to using the elections as a way to educate workers and lift the curtain that both parties are hiding behind in the plantation they call Baton Rouge. Whichever route we take, or be it multiple routes, albeit multiple routes. We have to go out to the workers, we have to be in the struggle, and we have to be dedicated to using our energy to build up the independent Southern movement of the working class to combat the capitalist, white supremacist establishment. We have to organize the workers to fight together to uplift the working conditions of the working class as a whole. Because the power is not in bourgeois parliament, it is in the people.